wanted to have the option to to the option whether to participate or not. Because if we are a member, automatically we have to honor the warrant of arrest issued by the ICC. So we wanted to have the option to prosecute the accused here or to turn him over. So that's the reason why we adopted our own international humanitarian law, which really just almost a copy of the Rome Statute. But I think to make it simple, we can rejoin, no? And that will remove a lot of these jurisdictional questions. Although I think it's very clear that the ICC has jurisdiction because that's uh, the offenses were committed while we were a member of ICC. But just to have a peace of mind, just to stop all
Smoothen
of
the
these,
edges.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, smoothen the edges.
yeah, smoothen the edges. But it's not necessary, but it's helpful.
Exactly. Well, the reason why I want to say na hindi lang obviously ito legal issue, right? This is a legitimacy question also, basically because it's the politics of it, right? I mean, one of the weird thing is not only did BBM adopt the jurisdictional argument of DDS, basically Duterte's for quite some time, until January I heard him making that argument na walang jurisdiction ng ICC. But the lawyer of Duterte right now is from the same firm that Marcos hired to defend their deferral of cooperation and question the jurisdiction. Like, this is creepy, right? This is kind of weird. So basically, not only Harry Roque was their former consultant on this issue, basically Duterte is using the same firm that Marcos was using also, or particularly Menardo Guevara was using earlier, right? To kind of
Mhm.
push the can down the road. That doesn't come off very compelling, if I can put it that way, Justice. Doesn't it feel weird, incestuous almost?
Yeah, it's an inconsistent position, and but they have no choice. I mean,
You
the
mean
way I
wala
look
nang
at it,
papatol sa kaso nila? Yun na, like, no one is willing to stake their reputation. Wala nang ibang mahanap na, ano?
well, I don't know the circumstances there, but what I can say is they really have to. Their strongest defense is the jurisdictional issue, which to me will not save Duterte. But because the evidence against Duterte is so overwhelming, you have three people who follow these instructions, who and so many admissions, especially his admissions. I mean, he cannot get out of that. These are admissions under oath in the Senate and House investigation. So their their best defense is the jurisdictional issue.
Which most likely will also fall
Yeah,
apart. And
yeah,
and that's interesting, right? Sara Duterte is asking for financial assistance. Is it because she knows na they're just throwing money down the drain basically here? Because even they know internally na malabo yung arguments ng mga to. I heard some critics even at The Hague telling me na they won't be surprised Duterte's current team will leave him after September or so once, it's crystal clear na untenable yung position nila. Basically, operator daw yung mga yan. I didn't say they're Harry Roque level operator, um, but isn't it risky for Sara to open their bank accounts? Kasi 'di ba ICC wouldn't just give you financial assistance, right? They will have to investigate if, you need that assistance. Doesn't that trap them basically down the Trillanes trap, which is, yeah, buksan natin accounts ng mga Duterte, tignan natin saan galing pera nila. I mean, wasn't that a weird move by
yeah.
Sara
I think it's
Duterte?
just PR that they don't have the money trying
Kawawa
to.
effect, pawawa effect.
Yeah, that's the meaning of that. But we of course know that they have the funds.
Oh, well, they have the funds, but they have many gastos also, right? There's an election going on, and Sarah will need a lot of resources as things get more interesting in the coming months. Just as in the 2 weeks or so you were away, and we'll talk about your time while you were away, and the situation obviously in the US right now, which is also quite crazy, and a lot of constitutional issues are coming up. Medyo nagkaroon talaga ng rallying effect, no? Or at least what we call consolidation, crystallization effect. Bato is number 3 now in some surveys like Pulse Asia. Bongo is number 1. Even Mark Oleta is suddenly within the range, and Philip Salvador pumasok pa. And practically all of the Duterte aligned elements, with the exception of Jaime Marcos, right, have been doing very well in the past weeks or so since Duterte's arrest. So it looks like the sympathy factor is a factor after all, at least so far, Justice. What is your read of that? Is your read that is a temporary thing? It's just natural. Ganun naman tayo Pilipino. Naawa tayo kasi matanda si Digong, ganun. Is your read also pumalpak yung administration in terms of coming up with a compelling argument para hindi maawang tao dun sa mga tao na allegedly engage in mass atrocities? What is your read of this whole situation, Justice? Because indeed, nagkaroon ng Duterte bump.
Well, I find it strange because the surveys show that from 52% of the people who want to hold Duterte accountable, it went up to 62. So it's a 10-point increase. That's huge. But at the same time, the the candidates of Duterte inch up in the survey, went up. So there seems to be a
Dissonance?
disconnect,
Yeah, dissonance. Yeah.
yeah, dissonance there. So we have to, but to the question, if when the question is, should Duterte be held to account? It's clear from 52 to 62. So that's more direct, no, rather than if you look at the rise of these candidates, uh, because if you look at Bongo, I mean, his Malasakit Center helped a lot of people. So you can say that that is the primary reason why he's up
Nation.
there.
So what basically you're reading there is that first of all, it's hard to make sense of different surveys because they're contradictory, and sometimes I would say, well, voters are contradictory, right? I mean, these are the same voters na sabi sila na ayaw nila ng pro-China candidates, and yet I don't think we need to
Yes.
name names, right? Like, wait, last time I checked, diba? We in the past we heard ayaw ng tao ng corrupt. Next thing you know, yung mga convicted na tao ay gusto pa rin nila nandyan, di ba? So, I think sometimes we put too much stock into these surveys, right? As if they are a kind of a fundamental, let's say, mirror of the algorithm or the interest of the voters. For instance, yung kay Sara Duterte, tumaas yung approval ratings niya, kay BBM bumaba. Kay BBM na bumaba, medyo gets ko bakit, cost of living issues. I think the president has still, he needs to work on his charm offensive and rhetorical engagement with the public. But, but wait lang, last time I checked, Sara had an actual job last year. And actually, her approval went down when she was the education secretary. This year, I'm not sure what is, ano bang trabaho ni Sara Duterte? So, ano to, approval ng kanyang fashion? Approval ng kanyang aesthetics? Hindi ko gets. Like, kaya nga hindi ko na pinatulan yung mga ganyan survey. Like, okay, approval of what of Sarah? What has she done as a public servant, right? Last time I checked, she has been all these weeks just with her dad and taking care of her dad's case, which is a partisan familial issue, right? So, kaya minsan ayoko na seryosohin yung mga surveys, but na natin pinapatulan. Do you think, Justice, that sometimes we're putting too much stock into surveys and maybe it's really a question of what is the rule of law, right? And what is right? Because if we follow surveys, it's like following stock markets to make big decisions about, long-term investments. You never follow stock markets about as a basis for your long-term investment decisions, right? Because they're two different things. Ikaw, Justice, what is your read of that?
Well, it's hard to make sense out of it, uh, but we just have to look at it deeper because uh, Sarah's popularity went up despite the fact that, yeah, as you said, she's not doing anything anymore. Maybe because you cannot criticize him for her work because she's not doing anything.
So,
Maybe that's the reason why
so
her
you will
ratings
have
went
more
up.
approval. You have no job to do. Parang BBM kasi may trabaho siya, so you blame him dahil meron siyang responsibilidad. So dahil walang
Yes.
responsibility, I mean, you see how ridiculous this is becoming, right?
Yeah.
Justice, right? Like people who have no responsibilities basically are now getting more approval for what, right? Which is crazy, right?
Maybe because there are less attacks on them because they are not doing anything.
Does that mean BBM shouldn't also do much now? Last time I checked, he's commander-in-chief, right? Yun yung problema natin, Justice, no? Minsan talaga parang, papatulan ko ba itong mga surveys na to eh? And minsan naiinis din ako, parang hindi po trabaho ng mga legal experts and political experts to just analyze surveys, right? There's so much more to our democracy than surveys, right? Justice, I mean, this is about civic duty and rule of law.
Yes, but the surveys are not always correct. So we will see. But we should not give up explaining to the people the because that's the only way really to get the correct results from the people, correct actions.
And you're encouraged at least by the increase in numbers of support for ICC, diba?
Yes,
Yes, exactly. Although
that's it.
yeah.
That's the positive sign there in the surveys that 62% of the people want him to be held to account. And for me, that's the important thing.
That's interesting, Justice. So what happened was I interviewed Dr. Garcia, who heads the WR numero, who also has that number, 62% among others. So I think Okta people also have been tracing this. Nakita natin yung increase. Interestingly, Justice, I had a meeting with a major corporation in the Philippines who do their own consumer sentiment survey, and they showed me yung very detailed breakdown, regional breakdown. Based on their study, the numbers are not as encouraging, but importantly, meron regional, parang some would even say tribalistic divide. So for instance, the highest support for the ICC is in, guess where, Justice? Northern Luzon, basically, right?
Mm.
Benguet Province,
Mm.
Ilocos, basically, where Marcos comes from, right? And guess where is the highest level of criticism of ICC, right? So when I saw that number, medyo parang So it looks like responses of people are still refracted through that kind of north south, those kind of dynamics, right? I mean, as you know, Justice, I got into trouble because some people spliced my interview on the human development index issue, right? How do you think about that, Justice, that meron din tayong ganyan problema na minsan it is also a kind of a regionalistic approach when this is fundamentally a humanity issue and human rights and rule of law issue? How should we deal with that?
Well, I think we have to factor that in the regional regional issue because if you are from Mindanao, especially if you are from Davao, you would be defending a hometown candidate, and that's why the survey show that in Davao, former President Duterte is still leading uh, by a huge margin, no, for the mayor, and well, for me that is somewhat given, considering that uh, the we are more regionalistic than other countries, no.
Although, I mean, I would say, talking to Italians and all, they can tell you a lot about, Palermo versus, so to be fair, I think this is not unique to the Philippines, but, from my own experience of getting super bashed the other month for just mentioning lang yung differences in human development index from Benguet province to certain other areas, na-realize kong malakas talaga yan eh. So, actually, that number I saw, Justice, was something more like 91% in certain areas are against
Yes,
ICC. Like, so
yeah.
basically, it's 9% I agree.
Well, you can
That
just
was like,
imagine
that
that
was
even
shock. Oof.
in Ateneo de Davao, a Jesuit school where I studied from grade school to high school. Uh, Duterte family are leading in the survey.
Well, I could also say the same thing about, well, Justice, you also have Ilocano connection, right? Like, very smart schools in the north of the country, right? People liking Marcos again or still like Marcos, right? Kaya parati ko sinasabi, ako, I'm Ilocano, I'm proud Ilocano, proud Baguio boy, but I never voted for Marcos. I'll never vote for Marcos. I'm critical of Marcos. And I always hope ganun din sa mga ibang mga kababayan natin na sana hindi tayo mapapadala sa mga regionalistic political agenda ng mga trapos sa mga others. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Kasi just I was really shocked. Like when I saw that 91% in certain areas, like, wait, like that means 9 out of 10 people ay okay lang sa akin nila yung ginawa ni Duterte. Parang ganon. Like, that was a bit shocking to me. And then, of course, for my people in the northern of the Philippines, also like parang, of course, it's convenient for you kasi kalaban. You know what I'm saying? So, medyo mahirap maging, you don't want to be cynical, but this is also the reality that we have to cope with, Justice. But again, there's always the silent majority, right? Like, I noticed when I was in doing lives, when I was in Roma, I was in Hague, maraming mga OFWs just isang, kasi pag nagla-live ka sa isang bansa, ang ita-target ng algorithm, yung mga audience mo sa location na yan. So if I
Mm.
did live in Rome, yung mga OFW in Europe or
Mm.
OFW. So actually, ang dami nag-comment, sabi nila, Justice, interesting nga, sabi nila, ay, hindi totoo na lahat ng OFWs ay pro Duterte. In fact, yung iba nga sa amin, kinakayangan namin yung nangyari or ayaw namin sumama sa iba. Nadadamay pa nga kami, di ba? And then you had that incident in Qatar, etc. Yung mga ibang OFW were messaging me, some even posting it publicly na dinadamay nila kami. Hindi naman kami lahat pro Duterte na actually some would even say the majority of OFWs are actually just like majority of Filipinos, right? Medyo ambivalent. It depends. This election they like this person, that election, a lot of them voted for Digong before but now have different opinion. So kaya nga ako rin, I want to avoid also yung monolithic na pag ito, ganito. Kasi medyo fluid siya eh. Kaya I also agree with you, Justice, na we still have to fight the good fight, right? To win over the hearts and minds in the right direction, in the direction of, a right side of history for that matter. Justice, going back to this, what is your read of the Duterte legal team parang dictating the terms of engagement for the prosecutor side, including on the issue of, I don't know if you saw it, right? Like parang that was weird. Na parang yung team ni Digong pang nagdidikta anong pwede dun sa mga, kunyari, yung mga witnesses, di ba? And Attorney Conde was telling me, like, remember some of these witnesses, never sila nagkaroon ng passport, hindi pa sila nag-travel, a lot of them come from Inday. I mean, that's a very Harry Roque way of approaching it, right? I mean, what is your read? Like, anong pake ng team ni Digong to dictate to the other side how they can approach their witnesses and evidence?
Well, the lawyers for Duterte would always do that, but of course the court will not allow that. They'll block that. But that's the normal course of a lawyer defending the accused, no? But going back to the surveys, uh, the reason why I think 62% of the people want Duterte to be held to account and Sara's popularity rating went up because the Sara has not been connected yet to the extrajudicial killings, no. So from the point of view of the people, uh, Sara has not been the evidence against Sara has not been aired yet, no. So they don't think Sara is involved. But of course, the testimony, the affidavit of Las Cañas and Matabato linked Sara, no.
Okay, so basically your read, Justice, is this your read na naturally Bato should be next in line, right? Because he was the chief executioner at least in the early days. Maybe another PNP chief also that came after Bato or two. Um, but Sara's mayor of Davao, one of the largest and most developed cities in the countries, could also be within the crosshair of ICC. Do you think that would make sense? Because she
Yeah,
was a mayor of a major city. I mean, Davao is one of the most
yeah,
developed.
because there's
Yeah.
that affidavit that she continued the EJ case when she became mayor. But for the Filipino public, they have not really realized that yet. No? They haven't.
Because just sa tingin nyo, nagkakulang ang media, nagkakulang ang admin, nagkakulang civil society. Anong basa niyo po?
Well, because that was not reported widely and not discussed widely, no. But if that will be if the warrant of arrest is issued and that will be the basis, then people will know. But right now, I think people have not really connected her to the EJ case, no.
So naturally, that should be the next step if there is the preponderance of evidence, no? Justice meaning on the part of government, ICC, and civil society groups na nagdi-defend dun sa mga biktima ng EJK, I suppose.
Yeah, if a warrant of arrest is issued against her or anybody, the court will normally explain why. No, so that will come out if once there's a warrant of arrest.
Could there be, and this is where the complementary debate could resurface again, although of course it doesn't work retrospectively, right? Like nag-fail na nga yung justice system natin kaya pumasok ang ICC. But should the Marcos government press ahead with the mas malawakan na investigasyon ukol dun sa mga mid-level or yung mga hindi super at the very top people, siguro yung 6 to 11 people na nandun sa listahan ng ICC. Hindi kaya pwede argue ng mga pro-Duterte people or even yung mga iba na, yung pala, nag-work pala yung justice system natin. So, dapat hindi na makialam ang ICC. How do you think that sequencing and all should be handled, Justice? If ever the government finally does what it has to do, which is on our part also take care of yung mas malawakan na problema at saka mga people na involved sa EJ case.
Well, there is this principle of law that jurisdiction once acquired continues. No, so that will not affect those already charged. Uh, but I think the to go down to the level to the second tier would require a truth commission to to so to go over this, no. And remember that these are members of the police force. They will they have a they have this concept of omerta, no. Even the PNP, they have this. All graduates of PNP are taught not to squeal on fellow
Loyal.
alumnus. No? So it will be difficult. So maybe a truth commission is needed for that.
And what is your take on the Truth Commission? Should it be constituted under the incoming Congress? Can the executive constitute that? Although some would say hindi pwede na EO lang yan. Or should we have a kind of a more long-term multi-stakeholder process to determine the legal mandate and the direction and dynamics of the Truth Commission? Anong basa niyo dyan on this issue of Truth Commission and eventually transitional justice?
Well, ideally, maybe a law could be passed, no? But the executive has the power also. The president can create that because he has the power to investigate. Uh, as long as it applies to everybody, no one is targeted. So uh, I don't think anyone can complain that it's being targeted because many people will be affected here. So there's no one who is targeted if you go to the second tier. No.
Now, I want to go to the US, China, and the foreign policy dynamics, which is, of course, yun talaga yung atikain natin throughout the years, and also ask your analysis about Hexet's recent visit to Manila, the reassurance this year's Balikatan is even bigger than last year. Another Typhoon missile could be coming. F-16 deal, $5 billion, has so far at least been technically cleared. Before going that, just last point, Justice Scorpio, does this so since last time we talked, one major thing also happened, no? Which is Harry Roque officially now faces charges, no? Last time hindi, 'di ba? Ngayon, what is your read now that Harry Roque is facing these charges? Does it make it harder for him to stay in The Hague and enjoy the tulips, or does it make it easier for him to say persecuted siya?
Well, he's under investigation, and I think the uh,
Or
I
pwede
don't
siya
know when.
extradite? Or pwede siya extradite, if ever?
Well, yes, that could be the next thing, no? If we have a, I don't know if we have an extradition treaty with Netherlands, but that could be the, But I think his ground there that he's being politically persecuted might not hold water before the uh, Dutch authorities because it's very clear that he was uh, he was the legal counsel of this company. So it's very
Lucky,
difficult
lucky
for him to
19
say
again.
that it's a politically motivated. So I don't know how it will be resolved, but uh, it's an uphill battle for him, I think.
Yeah, well, uphill battle. He might need that. But kanina actually umikot ako dito sa Baguio, Justice Caprio. I was thinking, ano, parang may mga gagandang bagong bahay na nakikita ko dito. Ito kaya yung bahay ni ano, 'di ba? Kami ng mami ko nagchichis, parang uy, ganda ng bahay na to. Baka ito yung bahay ni Mr. Tulips na ang tawag namin sa kanya. Justice, let's go to the latter part and last part of our discussion. So obviously this is public knowledge, right? So you were in the US UPenn, right? I mean,
Yeah.
can you tell minsan kasi mahirap yung mga guests ko biglang ayaw para nila na sabihin ko saan sila or something eh. Hindi ka naman Harry Roque, Justice Carpio. So wala ka naman maling ginawa. So anong ginawa mo sa US, Justice Carpio, just for the sake of our audience?
Well, I had a 2 week fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania Perry World House uh, because they had a conference on the South China Sea dispute. And this was a conference among people who focused their research on the South China Sea. So that was, and I gave lectures to different classes, law class, international relations students. Uh, so that was it for about almost 2 weeks.
Obviously, you were there in the US in the middle of some even call it a cultural revolution, right? So we can talk about the immigration issue now, but my goodness, like Columbia University caved in, and still there, it's unlikely they'll get the funds. There was a fear that after an elite school like Columbia University basically caving in even preemptively, right, that there will be a kind of a domino effect. But Harvard University has stood its ground, and it looks like Harvard University is even willing to risk losing its tax exemptions, right? Status. So hindi lang losing billions in terms of science, laboratory related investments from the federal budget, but Harvard is going. What is your read of this academic freedom debate that is going on in the US? Because the conservative argument would be masyado daw naging woke itong mga Ivy League schools and all, and that if taxpayers' money in billions is going to these Ivy League schools or whatever university, they have a responsibility to reflect the mandate or preferences of an elected government for that matter, right? What is your read on that, Justice, on the
Well,
situation?
when I was there, even University of Pennsylvania was lost 200 million US dollars for their medical research, but something came up. The Trump administration admitted that the letter that they sent to Harvard was a mistake. I mean,
They
they
do
they
that.
said
They,
that
they
it
do that
should not have been
sometimes. Yeah.
sent
Yeah. Wala daw
because I think
authorization yung letter daw, hindi daw na ano, oo. Parang
yeah,
incomplete
so I
daw.
think they realize that they're going to lose because this is academic freedom. I mean, the purpose of a university is to search for the truth. You cannot you cannot say that you have to follow these policies. I mean, Trump wanted to be the president of Harvard University in effect. So I think they knew that they realized that they made a bluff. They were able to intimidate Columbia University, and UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, was quiet about it. But when they went after Harvard, Harvard knew that this was that the Trump administration will not win on these issues before the Supreme Court but it's at issue here is academic freedom. So uh, I think so that's why they backed down. They said, "Oh, that letter that we sent shouldn't have been sent.
Kasi walang
That was not
signature or
authorized." So
authorization. Yeah,
they
exactly.
walked back everything, and so I think but they have not withdrawn it. I mean their attack.
Threat. Yeah.
But when they said that it should not have been sent, I mean that their entire argument collapsed already.
I mean, to be fair, other schools, and I don't want to play this East Coast, West Coast, whatever, Midwest kind of, enough of regionalism and all, baka pahamak na naman tayo. But in fairness, just to be clear, also Princeton University president gave a very strong interview, I think, to New York Times the other week, saying there's no way they're gonna. So a couple of East Coast schools, Ivy League schools, also made it clear. So just to be clear, hindi lang Harvard ang nag-hardline na there's no way we're gonna cave in.
Yeah.
Just to give credit also to the other schools, because I don't think Harvard made that decision in isolation. I think they were confident that Princeton, Yale, and other elite schools in East Coast would also hold their ground. So they felt they were not alone in this. Yun nga, kaya biglang Colombia standouts in the wrong way. But there's the other side to this justice, right? Kaya sabi ko, this has a very Duterte feel. Like yung mga first 100 days in Duterte, parang idea na he could get away with anything, right? Including do you again justice your justice in the Philippines, but obviously the Philippine justice system has a lot in terms of overlap or in terms of heritage from the US jurisprudence. I keep on hearing our legal friends in the Philippines even citing the jurisprudence in the US Supreme Court. What is your read of on the immigration issue? I mean, if you look at the case of Kilmar, there are a couple of other cases that less known, but I've been also looking at. I mean, they're just dumping people into El Salvador, and then the El Salvador president is saying, "Oh, I'm not gonna bring back terrorists." Then Trump is saying, "Oh no, I'm not gonna take terrorists. I'm not gonna tell El Salvador what to do." And then and then retrospectively yung iba, kahit mali daw yung pagkuha sa kanila, biglang, hindi, pero member to ng gang, right? There's another case, this young kid, I think 18-year-old, si Teran, right? Who, like, from Venezuela siya, he came legally through the process during Biden and all, but he had a kind of a criminal conviction in Chile, and then yun ang ginamit laban sa kanya to say he belongs to some dangerous Venezuelan gang. Parang, minsan parang naalala ko yung panahon ni Digong na pag may nangyaring tokang, tapos alam nila mali yun, retrospect, hindi, siguro drug addict yun, or sinabi nga ni Bato, di ba, things happen, right? Um, I know it's not the same because we're not talking about extrajudicial killings, but in terms of like pushing the boundaries of executive power, in terms of undermining checks and balances, because your power as a Supreme Court justice in the Philippines was a reflection of that American style separation of powers and checks and balances. What is your read of that? That Supreme Court is now even demanding the government to correct some of these mistakes, and it looks like the government is not as receptive as it should be.
Well, the issue of due process is very strong. I mean, you can deport them, but you have to go through a process. That's for in our system as well as in the U.S. That's a bedrock principle. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court will stand its ground here. That okay, if you have anything against this guy, bring it out and we will support you. But you just cannot say, "We sorry, we made a mistake." I mean, that is against due process, no. So you have to correct yourself if if you made a mistake.
Do you,
So I think the Trump administration cannot win on that issue on due process because uh, if you allow any administration to bypass due process, then that's the end of democracy.
Speaking of the end of democracy, are do you think that the U.S. justices should ask advice from Filipino justices on when you were dealing with Duterte, who was openly defying, including co-warrantoing your former colleague, former associate Supreme Court Justice Sereno?
Well, I don't think they read our decisions, but
That would be interesting, right? Like, because this
but
is yeah.
the U.S. Supreme Court has been berated for for that decision, saying that the president has almost unlimited
Immunity, yeah.
immunity.
Immunity issue, yeah.
I
That was
think that was an overreach, and that emboldened Trump to do all of these things. And so they're trying to walk back now.
yeah, and my understanding is that the argument is also is that because this involves El Salvador, a detention center there, this is a foreign policy issue. Therefore, other branches of the state basically owe deference to the president. That's the line I've been hearing from a couple
Yeah,
of top level officials.
yeah. In the area of foreign policy, the president has a wide discretion, but since they said they made a mistake, that's their problem. I mean, they cannot say that. Oh, sorry, we made a mistake. It cannot be remedied anymore. They have to do something to remedy it because they admit it was a mistake. That's the problem there. You are given a wide discretion if there's nothing wrong with what you did.
Last point, Justice, again, during our previous UTAC forum discussion and also here on our deep dive podcast, you were quite critical of the Trump administration's reliability when it comes to its alliance commitment, even in Asia, right? Because I think some of our friends, including the government, were saying, yeah, siguro kung nasa Europe ka or Ukraine ka, unfortunately, yes, but if you're, frontline Asian ally, maybe not. What is your read of the fact that as we speak, I think Marco Rubio is planning to head to the Philippines. Pete Hegseth was here the other month, and he cleared even new, the weapon systems to be deployed for the Balikatan. Even a second Typhoon system could come in. A $5 billion F-16 fighter finally cleared, at least at the technical level, although yung pera will be the issue again, as always. Um, don't you think maybe Justice we're a bit unfair in terms of US Philippines at least? Kasi parang sympathetic sila sa atin. Again, I don't wanna, you know, ako kasi I believe in engagement. I mean, the good Pope Francis made J.D. Vance for a few minutes yesterday, right? And in fairness to J.D. Vance, even though he has a much more conservative understanding of Catholicism, he was very deferential to the Pope in his message of kanina in sending his condolences. I- isn't it just as maybe we're being a little bit too skeptical, or maybe things are good now but they could change radically? What is your read based on the facts on the ground so far?
Well, as I said, uh, everyone below Trump, uh, I mean, more or less, we know their position. Uh, but the problem is Trump himself, very unpredictable, and I think everybody agrees with that. But there's something that worries me because uh, in the South China Sea, as in Ukraine, the reason why Russia is annexing Ukraine, part of Ukraine, and why China is claiming the almost the entire South China Sea is because of national security. I mean, that is the reason. And Trump is using the same argument to claim Greenland national security. So that's the big problem because the that puts the U.S. in the same camp as Russia and China. And uh, how can we now take China to task for using that argument when our ally is using it also? That because of national security, we can take territory, and Trump is not taking off the table the use of force.
So you're talking about permission structure, basically. That US is normalizing this kind of imperial
Yes,
expansion. It's
because the U.S. is actually helping uh, Russia and China convince the world that national security is a ground for is a valid reason for annexing territory. I mean, that's not what the UN Charter says. You cannot you cannot use force or threat of force. You have to go to arbitration. But if Trump will support that basic argument of Russia that because of national security, we can take the territory of another country. Then we're back to
19th
the might
century.
is right era,
Yeah, I mean,
and all these nuclear armed states will just trample on the smaller states, no? But and uh, in that case, so what will happen there is countries like South Korea and Japan, maybe Taiwan, will go nuclear because that's the only way they can protect themselves.
so basically it's the erosion of the rules-based order or
Yes.
attempts at the rules-based order. Um, I'm so it's hard to argue how Trump is a rules-based order kind of guy, except there's this interesting argument, Justice, right? As we speak, Trump is normalizing ties with Russia. He's so far the talks with Iran are also going well. So one argument is that what if the US really here is just isolating China from its other call them Axis powers, revisionist powers. Because if you look at it, for instance, on tariffs, right? It's only China which is so far being beaten down big time. I mean, like as we speak, it's like 124% tariff rates. There's an all-out trade war. There's no trade war with Russia and not with Iran, although there's sanction, obviously. But what I'm saying is, what if like both things could be true at the same time? Now, Trump is undermining the rules-based order, except when it comes to Indo-Pacific, because China is really the real threat to the U.S. global hegemony in ways the other powers are not, and therefore US will be more realistically helpful. Do you get what I mean? The term for that is actually reverse Nixon, right? Like Nixon got China to side with him against Soviet Union tactically. Maybe he could get Russia and other revisionist powers on a normalization path and then isolate China. Isn't that a is that too visual thinking for you? Because as we speak, grabbing trade war nila with China. I don't know how this is gonna. Or you're saying maybe tomorrow morning Trump wakes up and says, "Okay, I love China, great people," and then he's gonna just end the tariffs. Ganun ba yun? I mean, what is your read?
Well, Trump has not withdrawn the tariff against Canada and Mexico. It's still there. So it's not as if Trump has targeted only China. It's still there, and the reaction of Canada has been very strong. So uh, and even the American companies are leaving the U.S. I mean, the John Deere, you have GM, Stellantis. They're shutting down their factories in the U.S.
Because
and
yung supply
setting
lines
up.
nila is Canada and the rest, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're putting up factories in India, Brazil, and Mexico. So that is how the Americans themselves see Trump. That he's just too unpredictable that they cannot plan. If they cannot plan what to do in the U.S., so they do it outside the U.S.
Yeah, so in a sense, it could actually even backfire, even if intention ni Trump could be right. Because my reading of
Yeah,
Life Heiser, yeah.
it's backfiring on Trump now. As far as U.S. companies are concerned, they have to transfer their. The purpose of Trump is he always says that I want to bring back manufacturing to to the U.S. What the reverse is happening? The opposite is happening. The U.S. companies are saying we cannot operate here with this kind of unpredictable policy, so they're moving out.
And speaking of moving out, do you think this is an opportunity for the Philippines to work more with Europe, with Canada, with all of these countries na hindi superpower but ayaw nila madikta ng any of the superpowers and they have money. I mean, they're
Yeah,
big companies,
it should
Japan,
work,
Canada,
but
Europe, yeah.
we should. Yes, this is an opportunity for countries like the Philippines, but our problem is uh, they will not come here because of our high costs of energy. I mean, because these are manufacturing activities requiring power. Basically, they need uh, cheap power, and we have one of the highest power rates in Asia. So we
Unless we
cannot really take
subsidize it.
advantage of it until we resolve the power issue.
I had incidentally the Department of Energy, the secretary. I think you were colleagues at some point in UP Law. On another show I have, and his argument is that they're still trying to squeeze something out of Malampaya. There's still some adjacent efforts and all, and that there's going to be some difficult transition, but they're working on that. Ang argument ko naman, there's always industrial policy, right? Can't we subsidize electricity in certain special economic zones, right? Everyone is doing industrial policy. The Chinese are cheating like crazy, right? That's why their cars are so cheap, the EV cars, right? Because they're subsidizing the engineers, they're subsidizing everything that goes into those EVs, including even recruiting the head of a former Audi Chinese executive who they brought into over. So, para my point is, naturally, the Philippine government should have some sort of industrial policy. I mean, you took economics, Justice, right? I mean, you're an undergraduate. I'm surprised
Yeah,
that Filipinos are not talking about industrial policy. This is
yeah,
everywhere in Germany, in Japan, US. I don't know why no one talks about it here.
yeah. Vietnam and China are subsidizing their power rates for their export manufacturing companies, and that's why we cannot compete because our economists follow the traditional way that there should be no subsidies. But if you don't do that, then you miss out. You miss out. The locators won't go to you. They will go to the country that offers subsidies, and it's like you must have if you're into sales, you're selling a product. You must have some loss leaders. I mean, sell something that will attract them. Sell it cheap.
May
They
promo
will,
ka, may mga promo, di ba? May mga
yes, yes. But
take one,
but
take two.
our economists uh, are too bookish to do that.
And oligarchs who control the power sector and all. That's my problem, Justice. Kaya nga sabi ko I really kasi tama naman yung DOE secretary natin. People can watch that separately once the video is out na actually if you remove the subsidy, ang taas din ng rates sa Vietnam, Malaysia, other countries.
Yeah.
The only reason sobrang mahal tayo is that tayo lang hindi subsidized. So parang ang point ko is, why are we playing by the book when no one is playing by the book? Not China, not Vietnam. Even the Europeans, the Germans are, they have their own industrial policy. I just always found that confounding. I know, Justice, you're a legal mind, but I don't know, when you were taking economics, wasn't industrial policy, it just always surprised me. Like, this is like common sense. You really have to subsidize power for manufacturing. Otherwise, good luck talaga sa atin. And market in the Philippines means oligarchs basically, because there's no free market here. It's a few companies, a few families controlling the power sector. So I know that you would have wanted to discuss Malampaya plant and all, but I think I'm just realistically looking at it and saying like that will take some time, right? Even if we start drilling today in Reedbank, we won't see the result for years to come. So in the meantime, alangan naman will just be status quo. So kaya my position is industrial policy, go for subsidies. And I'm in Baguio, we have Texas Instrument here. We have been doing semiconductors here in Northern Luzon. I'm saying bring in the Taiwanese. Maybe they want to invest also here, some of their semiconductors and all. So what I'm saying, just is in this moment of disruption and craziness, maybe there could be some opportunity if you use your mind and if you push the envelope a little bit. And feeling ko masyadong our technocrats are a little bit too playing safe, which really disappoints me. At least yung mga abogado and politiko natin makulit, no?
Yeah, we have to compete with our neighbors. Otherwise, we lose out on the investments. If we don't compete with them, talo tayo. And we're not competing with them. We're too bookish.
And too complacent. Much of our trade with US is more BPO, etc., which is great, no problem. But AI can easily take that over time. But manufacturing is really something we really, really need. On that note, thank you so much, Justice Carpio. We hope to have you in person, God willing, next week. Obviously, I think all of us were still shocked with the latest developments and all of that, and nagsisinkin pa rin. But thank you so much, Justice, for making time for us. We really, really appreciate always you sharing your points of view, the authority and the passion you bring to our discussion. Really, really is an inspiration for us. So, Justice, please also take care of yourself. Stay strong, stay healthy. Maybe huwag kang travel rin masyado, Justice. Nakakapagod yata yan. And we want to have more of you with us for our podcast and all in person with Secretary Ronald and the rest of the gang and friends. And malapit ng elections, Justice. So we really need people like you to continue to educate our people. Parati ko sinasabi, hindi po yung problema yung bobotante. Ang problema natin, even yung middle class natin, mukhang kailangan ng proper political education. Did you know, Justice, I had access to data candidates like Kiko Pangilinan, their highest share of vote is among E and D na walang property. Their lowest share of vote is ABC. So actually, what
Wow.
people don't know is, don't emphasize is yung ABC, which is really C, di ba? Kasi yung A and B naman
Mm.
nasa ano yung gated communities. Hindi sila they are more like Duterte or even Marcos, di ba? Hindi sila progressive. So our middle class, unfortunately, is not as progressive as people think. And as a share, actually, they're even more, in the wrong side, I would say sometimes. So I know this is a sensitive issue, but this is also at the heart of the new book by one of my mentors, Dr. Walden Belly, who just released his new book, Memoirs, Global Battlefields, when he discusses his experience in Chile, whereby the middle class turned against the Allende government and supported Pinochet. Maybe, Justice, I'm kind of pushing you to write also your memoir. Are you working on a memoir, Justice?
Well, not yet. I have to finish the territorial dispute. I hope to
Of
finish
course.
my book because I've written on the maritime dispute.
Of course. And hindi ko sinasabi na you're senior or something. Justice, our prayers and love for you for decades. We want you with us and we love you so much, Justice. It's just that medyo emotional ako today because I started writing a review of Walden's book. And I remember when I was very young, I was like 20 plus lang noon. I was telling Walden, one day maybe if you write your memoir, blah, blah, blah. And now I realize the memoir is finally there. And when I was reading the book throughout the Holy Week, medyo naging emotional ako. So I started the morning with that, and the next thing I know, also Pope Francis passed away. So it was a very overwhelming day. But all I want to say is Justice, what I saw in the memoir of Walden is very interesting because it's not just his personal memoirs. It's kind of like a introduction to his whole oeuvre, his range of works. So maybe my suggestion for people is when you do memoirs, kind of, hindi naman cheat, but kind of give a concise summary of your different works throughout the years, whether it's your work as a justice, your work as an intellectual and scholar. Because I think justice, in our era of short attention span, this is the best we can do, right? For people, para pag tinamat ka, basahin lahat ng libro ni Walden Belli or
Yeah.
tinamat ka, basahin lahat ng mga jurisprudential intervention ni Justice Carpio. Pag binasa mo itong libro na to, may idea ka na. No? Ito talaga yung contribution ni Justice Carpio, etc. So, mabuhay ka, Justice Carpio. Thank you so much again for your copy of the West Philippine Sea book, one of my most prized possessions. And I really look forward to your new book and more than happy to endorse and review that, Justice Carpio, on our platforms, among others. And God willing, Justice, I hope also you'll hopefully put also some time aside to create some sort of inspirational memoir, maybe for next generation of
Yeah.
publicly minded legal scholars like yourself. Mabuhay ka, Justice. Maraming
Thank you,
salamat.
Richard. Thank you to our viewers.
God bless po. See you soon, Justice.